climate change. Obviously, climate change is going to devalue our hydrocarbon resources, and none more so than the high-cost oil sands. But climate change is going to make other resources a lot more valuable, and none more so in Canada than its abundance of fresh water and its agricultural land. Growing seasons on the Canadian prairies are already 26 days longer than they were only 50 years ago. When we're talking about 2-degree changes in global temperature, that's the global average. When you talk about what it means for the Canadian prairies, you're talking a multiple of that. You're talking about 4 to 5 degrees. You change the temperatures 4 to 5 degrees, all of a sudden you change growing seasons. And when you change growing seasons, you change what you can grow. An acre of farmland in Manitoba, Saskatchewan, Alberta trades at about 1/5 the value of an acre of farmland in southwestern Ontario, and about 1/10 what an acre of farmland would be in the Corn Belt in Kansas and Nebraska. And that's because farmland reflects the value of the crops that you grow every year. The Canadian prairies have always been extremely fertile, but because of the shortness of the growing season, you grow wheat and canola. You don't grow corn. Guess what? That's starting to change. And maybe that's escaped the attention of the Prime Minister's office, because you can't, on one hand, talk about the promise of global climate change on agriculture, and then on the other hand, deny any relationship between carbon emissions and global climate change. But it sure hasn't escaped the attention of Monsanto or DuPont Pioneer, the big seed companies. For the last 5 years, they've been holding clinics on the western prairies telling wheat farmers how to all of a sudden grow corn, and have been spending billions of dollars on developing hybrid corn for the Canadian prairies. Because not only does turning up the thermostat 2 to 3 degrees allow you to grow corn where you've never been able to grow it before, but you turn the thermostat up 2 to 3 degrees in Kansas, in Iowa, in Illinois, in Nebraska, in the U.S. Corn Belt, you get a very different impact on agriculture than you do on the Canadian prairies. We got a taste of that in 2012 when the worst drought in 70 years devastated U.S. corn production and sent corn prices up 50%. All of the scientific modeling on climate change says that world food production is going to have to migrate to high latitude regions. And in fact, NASA, the US Space Agency, has identified the Canadian prairies as a climate change hot zone where you're going to see profound changes in ecology of fauna and flora. Not all of them positive, the pine beetle, Lyme disease ticks. I mean, a lot of nasties are going to get a passport to go to high latitude countries where they never had before. But in terms of agriculture, I think it creates enormous potential. That instead of being the energy superpower as dreamed by our leaders, I think Canada is going to become one of the world's primary breadbaskets. And when you compare how food prices, even today, have stacked up against oil prices, I think that's going to be a very value-added change to make.